Good evening or morning or whatever time of the day it happens to be. Welcome one, welcome all to the Writer's Bleck podcast. I am your host, Greg Nykus, back for another fun-filled, heartfelt, world-building conversation. I'm your host, Greg Nykus, and we are back for another fun-filled conversation this week. I'm sitting down with the author of the acclaimed Keeper of the Lost Cities series, Shannon Messenger, to talk about her latest release, Keeper of the Lost Cities, the graphic novel, Part 2, what it's been like revisiting the early days of Sophie Foster's story in a whole new format, how she balances heart, spectacle, and an absolutely massive cast of characters after more than a decade in this world, and we'll get just a few little bits, little details, little teases about what is in store for the finale of this epic series, Book 10, Elysian, coming soon. But before we get into today's episode, just a couple quick little beats of housekeeping. We will be off the air next week. There will not be a new episode of the Writer's Bleck podcast on December 14th for Patreon or December 15th for Spotify and Apple Podcast listeners. We will, however, be back with a brand new episode on December 21st for Patreon and December 22nd for Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're going to go bi-weekly for a short little stretch here with the holiday seasons and everything going on. I'm also getting over being sick, and we don't quite have a backlog like we normally have built up. It's just a really busy time of year, so we're gonna not take a full breather, but we're gonna dial things back just a little bit here for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back into the full swing of things for a little bit at the start of the new year. If you're enjoying the Writer's Bleck podcast, please consider leaving us a comment on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, following along with us over on our social media, at Writer's Bleck Pod on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, you can find us over on Patreon, patreon.com/Writer's Bleck Pod, where you can get episodes of the podcast one day early. All right, with all the boring stuff out of the way, let's get into the conversation with Shannon Messenger. When you are at a party or an industry event or a convention and you are asked to introduce yourself, how often does the title Cupcake Addict come up in that introduction?
Not as often as the questions about my cats, but pretty often, yeah.
Cupcakes are all over your website. Like, they have an identity of their own, it feels like. There's the imagery. You have an entire page devoted to baking recipes you've themed after your works. What was the genesis of the cupcake mascot, if you don't mind me asking, and where did the idea for the recipes page come from?
You know, I mean, it's one of those things where you're trying to figure out something about yourself that, is interesting when you're mostly a person that stays home in sweatpants and lives in your own head, and you're like, what about me is interesting? And I love baked goods. It makes me a great person to talk to about sugar and a terrible person to come to for nutritional advice. So, it just kind of was something that I put out there on, I think it was back in the days when X was Twitter, and I would talk about cupcakes and stuff, and it seemed to resonate with fans. And so it just kind of spiraled from there. And the baking, I love to bake. And it also kind of came from the fact that I have spent a lot of time creating invented foods, usually baked good type things for the books. And I had a lot of readers that were like, I want to eat that. And I was like, me too. And so there's a few things that I've never been able to come up with a recipe for. I'm not a trained pastry chef, so it's been a little bit limiting. But if I've ever made anything that I'm like, this kind of tastes like that, then I try to put the recipe out there for my readers. And it's been so fun seeing how many of them do make those recipes, and they do birthday parties, and they said, I'm just like, wow, I made a recipe. I did a thing. Who knew?
It feels like a really smart way to interact with your audience. As you mentioned, you don't have a background in culinary. Your background actually is in cinematic arts. What inspired the shift to writing a book instead of pursuing a film career? And do you think that background has helped you create more vivid and cinematic prose on the page?
Yeah, I actually started as an art major and eventually realized that I was never going to be able to draw from my head the way that I wanted to. I felt like my head always pictured it so much better, and what came out on the page I was disappointed in. And so eventually I got frustrated, and I was just like, I feel like I'm always disappointed in my work. I feel like I've spent all this time on a project and I don't even love it. And so I switched gears and I took a class just kind of on a whim. It was called Broadcast Writing and Production. And I'll admit, I signed up for it in part because it seemed like a class where I would get college credit for watching TV. And I did, but we also had to write. And that was when I discovered that finally that barrier was gone. What was in my head was coming out on the page. But since I was in a broadcast writing class, naturally it was kind of like, okay, so we're just going to stick with this screenwriting stuff. I was growing up in Southern California. You naturally get steered toward Hollywood. And so I went that route. But Hollywood is extremely collaborative, and I am kind of a control freak. And so I didn't like that, like your screenplay immediately gets rewritten. If you're on a TV show, you're in a writer's room and you get sort of assigned like one episode and everybody else picks all the things. And I was just like, but I want to be able to just be in charge of my story. How do I do that? And the answer was books. So I ended up kind of switching gears again.
So in 2012, then you put out your book, Keeper of the Lost Cities. It was the kickoff of this massive series that you're still actively working on. For listeners who might be new to it, can you give a brief overview and share why you think the series continues to thrive 13 years on?
Yeah, so it is the story of Sophie Foster. When we meet her, she is 12 years old and she is hiding the fact that she has this kind of superpower. She can read minds, and she thinks that it's because she fell and hit her head when she was 5 years old. But then she meets this mysterious boy on her class field trip, and he has the first quiet mind of anyone she's ever met. And when they get to talking, she comes to find out that that is because he's not human and neither is she. And that she belongs to this secret world hidden on our planet called the Lost Cities. That's kind of like Atlantis and Shangri-La and El Dorado and all those places. I decided I wanted them to be real, but I also wanted them to be the way that I wanted them to be. And so that is the Lost Cities. It is this, world where we've heard stories, but we don't know the truth. And that is where Sophie belongs. And so she has to kind of pack up and leave behind everything she's ever known and start over in this new world. But she's kind of thinking, yay, maybe I'll finally fit in. And then she kind of starts to realize, okay, but wait, why was I hidden away? What's going on? Like, I still feel different, and she is different. And I don't want to spoil things for people, but I'll just say, there's a lot of big big forces at play, a lot of big conspiracies, a lot of people basically trying to destroy the world, and Sophie is expected to save it. No big deal, she's got this, right? No, not a lot of pressure on a 12-year-old.
Not at all. None at all.
But I think as far as why the series still resonates, I mean, I think it's because what Sophie is grappling with, yes, she's dealing with it on a very exaggerated scale in the sense that she's quite literally a girl caught between two worlds, raised in one and belonging to another, and never really fitting in perfectly to either. But I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of like feeling like an outsider, and feeling like, we keep trying to find our people, and we keep kind of being a little bit different. And what Sophie's journey really is kind of deciding that she values authenticity over acceptance, and that she would rather be herself and rather find the people that embrace her for who she is, and just kind of cling to all of that, than try to be something that people expect her to be. And I think that is something that we're all struggling with, and just to be ourselves, and to feel the value is there in ourselves without feeling like we have to try to be something we're not.
And the series is known for its emotional intensity as well as balancing a very big cast of characters. What's your process for balancing so many character arcs without losing the emotional through line of the series?
It is why the books take me so long to write. It is a constant struggle, and I know that if I had readers here, they'd still be like, "But you should give us more Dex or Tam or Lee." I mean, it's a big juggling act, and I really have to. I always kind of come back to, okay, but what is the story here? Like, yes, I could write a million scenes with every character because I know them intimately. They're so much fun. I could, sit down and we could have what every character is eating for dinner that night, what they do before they go to bed. And it would even be interesting because they're interesting characters. But what is the story here? And then we're told in third person limited. So we are limited to scenes with Sophie. So what scenes of that story does Sophie need to be in? And that's kind of just my basic gut check of if I try not to be like, oh, but I love this character, so I should put more of them in. Okay, but does that make sense for the story? And so that's kind of my mantra as I'm writing is trust the story, stick to the story. This is what has gotten you this far. I have been raising this mystery for all of these books. My readers want answers. We need resolution. We need to see where this is going to go. So let's focus on this story and hope that we also achieve the balance and all of the other and give those moments and everything that readers are wanting and more. But it's at the end of the day, I'm telling a story, and that's my basic, through line.
Was there a character who surprised you the most in how they developed over the course of the series? I know you're going into book 10 now, technically book 11 or 12, but
Yeah, because I have a funky numbering system with my point 0.5 books. Yeah. I think honestly, Keith has been, I always call him the gift that the story gave me because he wasn't a character that I planned from the very beginning. I knew that I had some gaps in my cast. And I just kind of had gotten to this point where I realized I was stalling instead of writing. And so I should just dive in and I would figure things out as I go because I would know exactly what I need. And so I knew that it was a little weird that Fitz didn't have any friends his age, that it would change the way people see him if he's basically just hanging out with his little sister's friends for the whole book. Like he wouldn't come across as this cool, popular guy if he doesn't have any friends. So I knew I was going to need that. I just didn't know who that would be. I kept trying to figure it out. And I finally was like, all right, just dive in and let's let the story do this. And I came up with Keith through a need in the story. I needed Sophie in the middle of class to have someone who would help her. And I was just like, who would that be? And I thought, well, what if there's a kid who's ditching? And suddenly Keith came to life and it was like, oh, that could be Fitz's best friend. And suddenly it was like, oh, and he could be this and he could be this. And watching how he has grown. I mean, one of those point 0.5 books that I had to add was so that we could tell a portion of the story through Keith's POV because we needed that. And he's one of the fan favorite characters. I'm pretty sure he's a big part of the reason why the series has become as successful as it has is because of Team Keith. And so it really is just this very cool thing to have watched that. I knew I needed that character, but I didn't know who it would be.
so I'm curious for when you're trying to find a character like that, when you are struggling to figure out a plot point, maybe you're trying to like work through something. What are your like personal processes for getting through that, like getting like figuring it out? Do you have like rituals that you do? Do you have like just taking a walk and hoping it comes to you that way?
It's yeah, a lot of that. It's step away from the computer because you can only pound your head against the laptop so many times before you're just gonna drive yourself insane. And it's playing the what if game. And I have found that the more outlandish the what if, the better. If I just say, oh, well, what if they went to lunch? That's not going to get me out of my stuck position. But if it's like, what if they suddenly realized they could fly? And even though I know that that's not the answer, it's like, because it's too outlandish, it isn't, I'm not shooting for the right idea at that point. But it's amazing how just kind of hearing something completely out of the blue it'll be, well, no, they couldn't fly, but what if they did this, and it'll kind of get you out of that rut of. And so I tend to do that a lot. I tend to either go on a walk or just step away, get some other stuff done that needs to be done, and in the back of my mind I'm playing the what if game. Well, okay, so what if instead of what I thought was going to happen, which clearly isn't working, what if instead this? And sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes not so much, but either way, eventually you get there.
As we've mentioned a couple times, you have two books in the series, Unlocked and Unraveled, which are labeled as 8.5 and 9.5. You've talked a little bit about the reasoning behind it, but can you dive a little bit deeper into what inspired these half-numbered books, these little in-betweenquels?
With 8.5, I realized that we were at this point where there was just so much information to keep track of that I was struggling to keep track of it all. And I felt like my readers must be struggling to keep everything straight as well. I feel like we need like a series Bible or a guide or something to kind of help them through. So I had just been kind of having that thought in the back of my mind, like, man, I wish this existed. And then I also realized that I was coming up on a piece of the story that would be told so much better if I could alternate between Sophie and Keith's POVs instead of just being limited to Sophie. But I was like, but what would I do with that piece? You can't like start a book in dual POV and then halfway through flip to this to single third again. And I was just like, I don't know what to do with this. And all of a sudden I thought, well, what if we smashed those two things together? What if we took the series guide and gave that to readers so that they could kind of keep track of all this stuff that's going on, have all of the information in one handy place because we are thousands of pages into this, and then also put that piece of story there, and so that it would all be in one place and give me that so that I could continue on with book 9 from a stronger starting point because we had that new piece. And so we did that, and then there was a section in book 9 where Keith leaves. I don't want to say too much more than that without spoiling it, but he's gone for about 600 pages of the 900 page book or something like that. I knew that there was a lot that he was doing, and I just kind of figured that I would eventually work that in. I'm really good at like future Shannon will figure this out. She'll figure out how to get this in. She'll be smarter than me. And so then when I sat down to write book 10 and I was getting to those scenes where Keith is finally revealing what he did, with backstory and stuff, trying to get that in, it was like I could only give a couple of paragraphs, and that was not capturing the gravity of what Keith was doing and why he chooses to hide it and all of that. And so I realized we need to go on this journey with Keith. Like readers need to go with him and see what he saw and do what he did so that when he's giving Sophie those two paragraphs or whatever, like it has the impact that it needs instead of just being like, oh yeah, I was doing this. And so that's why we added that. It will all make sense once we get to the later books. Yeah, I mean into book 10, like it will make sense that's why we had book 9.5, because there's stuff that Keith was doing that is very, very important to what's still to come.
The art of your series is so incredibly vibrant, from your covers to your fan art to your own pieces that you've made, and you've had so many talented collaborators. There's clearly a lot of care put into this world. When you first started working with artists, how did you convey your vision to them, and what does that collaborative process usually look like for you now?
I mean, I'm a very lucky author that my editor from the beginning knew that I came from an art background. I had started out college as an art major. And so, because some authors, it's like you get your cover in your email, like here it is, this is, whereas my editor right from the start was sending me sketches and letting me kind of weigh in and give feedback on things, and certainly over time has come to lean on me a lot more. So the amount of involvement that I got to be with the graphic novel was incredible. And so for me, my approach with these artists is always, because I spent so much time in college and walked away from being an art major because I couldn't really get what was in my head to come out on the page. It never looked as good on the page as what I was imagining. And I got frustrated and walked away from it. I realized I could do it with words. I couldn't do it with my hands and pencils and whatever else I was trying. And so I don't want to be the reason that an artist has that. I don't want to get in their head and try to tell them too much what they should draw and have it be that what comes out on the page, in their opinion, isn't as cool as what they were picturing because I tied their hands too much. So it's about finding an artist whose style I know I'm going to like what they're doing. And then obviously giving them certain guidelines because it has to match what I described in the book to the most. I mean, I try not to give too specific of details so that there is room for even my readers to imagine, and then same for the artist. And then I kind of step back and say, let me know what you need. Like obviously if you want me to send you detailed wardrobe items, I can. Or if you'd rather decide what you want them to wear, as long as it's within this kind of style zone, go right on ahead. And same for the architecture and things. It's like, here's some basic stuff, here's some photos that inspired me, but you do you as well. Like go with what's in your head. And I feel like we always get better work that way, because let the talent use their talent, and really let them shine as much as possible, because they will 100% of the time blow you away with what they're doing. And so it's about being collaborative, but also making sure I'm stepping back and giving them breathing room to create.
I guess what was the decision making process like behind adapting the series into a graphic novel? I mean, you already have such a big, I think, tie to art through fan art, through your amazing covers. Was that any of that involved in the decision, or was this just like a pitch that or an idea that you had?
I mean, I'll admit selfishly, this is like my author bucket list, like to have a graphic novel adaptation of my book. It was always like, yay, let's make this happen. But it was really as the series grew and continued on, and also, graphic novels reach a different readership. Yes, we also knew that existing fans of the series would be excited to have art of their favorite characters and favorite scenes in this format, but it is also, there are a lot of readers out there who see a 480-page book with no pictures and think, I don't want to read that. That doesn't look fun. That doesn't look exciting, and would much rather read something that is illustrated. And so to be able to have this story coming out in a format that is approachable to those readers is wonderful, because really, as children's authors, yes, obviously we want to sell our books and be able to keep our jobs and all of that, but deeper than that, we're trying to make sure that kids keep reading, because it's such an important thing for kids to use their imaginations and read. And so if graphic novels are a way to do that, then wonderful. And let's get that format out there in the world too, so that we can, help keep the readers of that format with books and reading as well.
I was definitely that kid that I would have killed for a graphic novel or a manga adaptation of most of the things that people were telling me I have to read. So I think it's a very smart way of looking at it. At the time of recording, Keeper of the Lost Cities, the graphic novel part 2, is coming out tomorrow. Has working on the graphic novel adaptation changed how you think about those early books? And what have been some of the biggest challenges in translating the Keeper world into the graphic novel format?
I realized that, this is a different format and it is going to tell the story differently. And so it would be better to have somebody who could be objective about it. They asked me, do you want to adapt it? Do you want to write the adaptation script for the artist? And I said, I have deadlines for the next book, and I feel like that's probably what I should be focusing on. But more than that, I really think that it is important to let someone who isn't as close to the work as I am have at it and be able to see, because they're going to have to make changes, and it's hard for me to see what those changes need to be, because everything is a certain way because it made sense in my brain that it be that way. And so then for me to step back and be like, hey, let's change this to something else, that's never going to be as good as having someone who is objective and can look at it and say, no, we should change this, we should change this, we should do this. And so it was just such a better process starting from there and letting, Selena kind of go in and break the book down into visual images and create this. And then I got to see the rough sketches. And then a lot of times when I saw the way the text and the rough sketches were working, I actually went in and changed the text even more, because it was like, okay, I can see how Selena has grabbed this line from the book, and I love that she did that, but honestly I feel like that line isn't as strong in this format as it was in the other format. And so I would rewrite sections of it as well, so that because again, what we were really trying to make sure is that we captured the scene. So it may be Sophie and Dex in the bottling starlight scene, like what's on the cover. They aren't having the exact same conversation word for word as in the book, but the heart of it and the emotions behind it and everything is the same. It's just capturing it through the proper format. So yeah, it was a really cool experience, and I imagine that if we continue on with the film, if Warner Brothers continues on with it, that it's going to be kind of similar in that vein, that changes and but still capturing the heart of the story.
God, I have so many more questions, but we're running out of time. So I guess the 10th and final book in the series, we'll skip ahead to that. It's planned to be released soon. Is there anything that you can tell us about this final entry? I know there's probably not much you can tell for spoilers, but is there anything you can share with us?
I mean, I will say, I'm first of all, I'm so grateful to my fans for being patient with me. It has been a daunting task, trying to tie together all of these threads through thousands and thousands of pages. I have so much more sympathy for George R.R. Martin now. I'm just like, now I get it. I get why this is so hard. But it's also one of those things where it really is that my job at this point is to give them answers. And so that's all I can really say to them is like, I feel like I've spent so much of this series raising questions, creating mysteries, and now my job is to give you answers. And so that's what the delay is because I want to make sure I give you those answers and trying to find a way to weave them all. I can't just be like, oh, well, I'll get that in the next book. You know, like and so I promise that all those things that you're wondering about still, like, who's this and what does that mean and what was this going on? Like, that's what I'm going to give you with this book is we're going to get those answers to those questions. And you can read the first chapter. I decided to release that because I knew my readers are just eager for something, anything. So we have the title now, it's Elysian, and the first chapter is actually in the paperbacks of Unraveled. So you can get a tiny taste of it, and the release date and all of that is still being figured out as I work through this Herculean task of my own of writing this book. And as soon as it is ready for the world, I promise I will put it out there. I am not trying to stall it. I just really, really want to make sure that we put out the ending, or I should say the book 10 that everyone is waiting for. So
yeah, well, I'm sure it will be fantastic when it comes along. Shannon, I have one more question. It's something I try to ask everybody before in every episode. We all have different things that inspire us to do the things we do, to get out of bed in the morning, to write, to go to work, to do whatever. Who inspires you today to do the things that you do?
Today, it's my kids. In fact, that's actually why I wear this necklace always. It has their birthstones and my birthstone and my husband's birthstone. So it's like my family around my neck. And it's like that, it's that reminder of like, whenever I'm sitting down to work, it's work is time away from my family. So it's kind of reminding me what I need to get back to. But then it's also like, this is what I do. I want my kids to be able to see that mom did this thing and hopefully be proud. And so it is both. And so I always try to sit down and keep my family around my neck, close to my heart as I'm doing anything work related. And in the beginning I was doing it for me. And then I became a mom, and it complicates your brain and your life in so many wonderful and beautiful ways, and now I am definitely doing it for them.
Well, that's awesome. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. Really appreciate your time, and we really look forward to the release of everything you got coming up. Guys, please consider heading over to Shannon's website, shannonmessenger.com, to keep up to date with everything that she's doing, find where you can buy the books, see what events she's got coming up, and of course, don't forget to check out all of the delectable recipes that are hidden for cupcakes and all kinds of just delicious sweet treats based on some of your favorite characters from Keeper of the Lost Cities. We didn't really have time to get to it, but Shannon also has a section on her website for art that she's made. There's a t-shirt involving a T-Rex that I think is a pretty hilarious thing, and that might be someone's Christmas present. We'll find out. We'll see. We'll definitely see. Another quick reminder, we will not be back next week with a brand new episode of the podcast. We're going to go bi-weekly here for a little bit just to get through the holiday season, and we will be back to full speed at the start of the new year, but we should have one more episode this year coming out that will be on December 21st for Patreon listeners and December 22nd for everybody else. So please make sure you keep up with us over on our Patreon or follow along on social media, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at Writers Bleck Pod, where you can see clips from the shows, get little announcements. I did a little unboxing video for this episode of the podcast because for some reason, whenever I get the books in the mail, I never think to open them on camera. I'm just like, oh, cool book, let's take a look at it, and it'll be pretty and fun. So that might be something we do more of going forward. It'll be really cool, though. I'm excited for whatever comes next. I'm excited for. So that'll do it for this episode of the Writers Bleck Podcast. Until next time, I've been Greg, you've been awesome, and keep writing.